Well, in our normal course of life around the city, we get to deal with some fun things every once in a while, and I think this is one of those. This has to do with some grant opportunities that have just arisen here in the last week or so. It's kind of left us scrambling around a little bit to get here this evening to talk to you about what is being proposed. I do want to say right up front, appreciate the good work by Nate Sir, our senior engineering technician in the Engineering Division of Public Works. He did a tremendous job putting together the scope of these 4 projects, the rough budgets that we're going to be talking about today, and the calculations to assess their viability as projects under these 2 grant opportunities. Elisa is, of course, our grants coordinator, project manager. I can never remember, specialist manager. There it is. She will be carrying the burden from this point forward to actually put together the applications themselves and get them off to the agencies for review and carrying these forward, assuming the council is in agreement to carry these forward. So what we have before us are a couple of opportunities, some of which we expected, one of which we did not, because it's something that just recently happened. There are a couple of funding programs that we have been working with over the years. The Local Highway Safety Improvement Program, LHSIP, we call it LSIP, is a program that we have used twice, well, technically 3 times previously, and it is a program that is designed to address safety issues on local highways. So not the state system, but on the local roadways. It is the funding program that we used to obtain funding for the North Polk Street project that was just completed in construction here this year. It is also the program that we use to acquire funding to make crosswalk improvements and pedestrian improvements on 6th Street between Jackson and Deacon. Now, if you'll recall, when we first went through that, we ended up moving the funding from that project to Polk Street in order to complete a bigger portion of scope on Polk Street. We subsequently then applied again for 6th Street pedestrian improvements for crosswalks, and were successful and being selected again for 2018 money to make those 6th Street improvements for pedestrian crosswalks. So those are the 3 that we've previously done under the LSIP program. The other project, or the grant program, is the Transportation Alternatives Program, and this is one that it's fairly new in the system in this form, but it's really a conglomeration of some of the earlier things: Safe Routes to School, the CMAQ, which is the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, things of that nature, all kind of got bundled together to become Transportation Alternatives, or TAP. So those are the 2 grant programs that we're talking about. There are, well, let me back up one more time before I jump into this. There are really 3 application processes that we're going to deal with right now. The first is the normal cycle for LSIP funding, which is fiscal year 2019. That call has just come out. Applications generally are due in January, early January, for the 2019 cycle. I just mentioned we've got 2018 money for 6th Street pedestrian crossings. So the normal cycle on an annual basis would be looking then for the 2019 program year. So that has just come out. But in addition to that, they identified some additional funding that came to the state of Idaho, that part of which was then allocated towards the LSIP program for one-time opportunity under the 2017 program to get additional projects. I think it's $2.5 million in the state put into that pot. So we're actually applying for things under the 2017 LSIP program, which means construction as early as next year, which normally it's several years out when you go through these application processes. So what the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council, LTAC, has said, who administers these projects, is go ahead and apply for this one-time funding, this 2017 funding. If you are not successful, then we will automatically roll that application into the January application for the 2019 LSAP program. So essentially one application gives you 2 opportunities under those 2 years of funding. At the same time, the TAP program has come out and said, oh, by the way, we also are looking for applications, and they are also due on the same schedule as the one-time LSIP money, which is November 4th. pretty quick, and part of the reason that this came to council tonight, because we really don't have time to kick it to another council meeting in November, it would be after the date of applications. So anyway, a lot of things going on all at once in a very short time frame. So we have identified 4 projects that would be eligible under these programs. They have to be projects that deal with either fatality accidents or severe accidents, which is called a Class A. There are also a Class B, Class C, and property damage only accidents in the system. Under these 2 programs, it's either fatality or Class A. The TAP program has a further limitation that it has to be pedestrian bicycle incident. Okay? In the LSIP, it can be vehicles. So it's a little broader. So we've identified 3 projects that are eligible under the LSIP and 1 under the TAP. So we'll talk about what those are. There's a lot here, so if you have questions along the way, please let me know. Okay, the first is the Polk Street Pedestrian Safety Project. And this is one we would do under the TAP because it does involve a pedestrian fatality that occurred on North Polk Street a few years back. And it is at the very north end of the city on Polk Street. So it's clear up in this area right up here, and we'll zoom in a little bit. So this is Polk Street coming through here. This purple line represents the city limit, kind of wandering through there. A little hard to see on the overhead, but there it is. Okay. And the Polk Street improvements to date with the work that we just completed under the LSIP program give us continuous sidewalk system really from E Street all the way up to this point right here. And there's sidewalk all the way through here. Here's Clark Place. Living facility on this end. This is the Moscow Hayden Fur Building, for those that are familiar with that, out on that north end of town. Of course, the mobile home park's up there. So the fatality accident that occurred was generally right about in this area, vehicle pedestrian accident. When you look at this area, it's similar to some of the other parts in the more rural sections of Polk Street in that there are no sidewalks, there's no curb, there's no gutter. There's some real light drainage ditch swales on the west side. The upper, smaller portions of Hog Creek are working along this easterly edge of the roadway. It's getting pretty small by the time you get this far north, but it's just a rural section. So it's in some ways not surprising that people are walking in the street or they're walking out of the driveways into the street, which is then, as I understand it, how this particular incident occurred. So the project that we're proposing would pick up really right at the end of the existing sidewalk system by these apartments, install storm drainage to deal with the swale that's through there, so collect the storm water, but also then put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk with a tree lawn, with a planter strip, along the west side, all the way up to the city limit on the north end. So if we're successful at this, it would be a project that would then complete sidewalk on one side of Polk Street from really all the way down to East Street to the north city limits and give us a pedestrian route that should provide a safer corridor for folks that are using that area of town. So that would be under the TAP program. The work, as I mentioned, west side of the street, it's roughly 845 feet. There's the components, the drainage, curb, gutter, sidewalk, tree lawn. The budget, as we've estimated it, is approximately $400,000. This is federal aid money, so then the local match is 7.34%, which is roughly $30,000 out of that $400,000 total. And you're going to hear me say approximately and about a number of times because we haven't really done true detailed estimates on these to be able to pin down exactly. So what I'm going to ask the council for tonight is to, if you want to move forward, to authorize us to make these applications, but to give us a little leeway in terms of what that budget is. And this is generally where we think the number is. It could go up, it could go down a little bit based on the fine-tuning of the scope of these as we move forward into the application.
What effect does that have less on the local match then?
Because it's a 7.34%, it will go up and down with the overall budget. Yeah, so if you see a 5% increase in that project cost, you'd see a 5% increase in the local match piece. Okay. So that's the first of those projects, again, under the TAP. The second one, which is the first of the LSIP projects, would be illumination on 6th Street corridor. So 6th Street, of course, has been right in this part of town. We are looking at the stretch that would go from Deacon, right at the kind of the entrance to campus, over to Jackson Street. So that corridor right through there that's in the red hatch. It's a very busy pedestrian corridor. This is the stretch where we are currently funded under 2018 money to make improvements to crosswalks, possibly some curb bulb type things to fix some of the physical hardscape that the pedestrians use, this particular project would work to improve the illumination. And it's been our goal for a while to extend illumination all the way through this corridor, essentially tying, the heavy pedestrian campus area and that origin, to the heavy pedestrian downtown central business district, that destination, and vice versa. A lot of people walk this, a lot of people ride it. The lighting out there is okay, but not great. And there's a lot of areas that probably could be a lot better than it currently is. So this project would work in that area, essentially some overlap for a good part of what we're doing with the 18 money. It would install roughly 22 of the vintage style luminaires, the full cutoff LEDs, similar to what we have on College Street. Budget on this.
You got a question?
No, I was just going to ask, how does this mesh with the realignment of the eastbound lanes on 6th Street at Jackson and the URA project?
Hold that thought.
Project.
I'll come back to that, okay?
Okay.
Because that's actually on our list today. Budget on this is approximately $500,000 with a local match of roughly $37,000. It seems like a large number when you think about 22 lights. But part of it is looking at what is the electrical system that's involved, how much of the sidewalk do we have to disturb to either update the electrical system or run it to places that it doesn't exist today. Plus you have to put in the light bases and then, of course, restore the sidewalks around those types of things. So it's not truly just lights, I guess I would say. There's all the things that come with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that because these are federal aid dollars that are involved, there's a lot of things that we have to add on to project costs because LTAC has a slice of cost. We have to have construction engineering dollars. We have to have design dollars. There's certain contingencies that are built in. So what you might think of as being, okay, construction maybe here, there's a number of add-ons that are required to be put into the grants. And they've done that because they've had problems in the past with agencies underestimating what some of those costs would be, and then you get, halfway through your job and suddenly, whoops, we're out of money. And they come back to the agency and say, hey, looking for more grant funds. Well, they're trying to avoid those kind of situations. So there are some mandatory additions that we have to put in that do tend to drive the prices a little bit. So that'd be the lighting, Deacon to Jackson. The next LSIP project is another illumination job. This would be on 3rd Street, so a little bit further north. And this would run from Jackson, there on the east, all the way out to just past Llewellyn. And it's at that point that we go, you can just see it right there, to the big overhead Cobra-style lights that you see on the highway all the way out to the state line. Those were installed from this point out to the state line as part of the 5-lane section that was built back in the 2000, 99, somewhere in there, back quite a while ago. But the lighting through here, a lot of it is still just typical wooden pole, power pole installations with a luminaire stuck on it. Standard Avista type application at intersections throughout the community. We have done some lighting surveys on this corridor because frankly I've been concerned about how well these crosswalks are lit, and what we've found is that these intersections are pretty dark. And there really is a need, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic north and south, going to and from campus, heading up to a lot of the apartments, and homes that are for rent up here in the northern section of town.
Question for you on this, Les, that one bend on 3rd Street, right before you get to the furniture store, that's the worst one,
Right
where the Nissan car is, and that pizza place, the Papa Murphy's. What kind of, this lighting is going to be more effective for that, I'm hoping, because that is a dangerous spot.
It's a challenging intersection, Llewellyn 3rd and the highway coming through there is no doubt. This is an intersection that, in the long run, we would like to reconfigure to make more of a sweeping corner through here between Llewellyn and 3rd that would square up the intersection of the highway. That's a project that's been beyond our ability to fund right now. So in the interim, we're working with it best we can. If you recall, of course, the tracks used to be in here.
Yep.
Those have gone away. We've restricted some of the turning movements that used to be. You could turn left off of 3rd Street and go back to the west, or you could turn into 3rd Street from the highway. Those have all been restricted. There's a crosswalk that's installed here now to try to keep pedestrians a little more in a more predictable location. So all those things have been done over the years to try to help the overall safety net in that intersection. Lighting is an area that's really not been addressed at this point. It's still the lighting that's been there all the way along. So we would include lighting for that intersection as well as all the others along this corridor. We would be just most likely alternating lighting back and forth all the way along the corridor, and based on the spacing that we need to give appropriate levels of lighting for pedestrians and for the vehicles.
John, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm sure this has been answered, but I forgot